No one expected that Cole Hocker wins the Olympic 1500 meter final, beating both Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr, and breaking the Olympic record in the process with a blistering 3:27 time. And this is what makes track so fun. You never really know what's going to happen. You can do all of the pre-race analysis in the world, but ultimately there could always be a huge upset. As one commentator famously said in Budapest, favourites don't always win. Pundits can do all the race analysis they want, but you never know what will really happen. What we can do is some good post-race analysis. Because whilst I would say the win of the race was fairly unexpected, the way the race actually played out happened roughly how I thought it would. Of course, Jakob Ingebrigtsen started off the race very quickly. He loves to front run, we knew he would, and we knew that his tactics going into this would be trying to take the sting out of Josh Kerr's kick. Ingebrigtsen's always had the fitness on Josh Kerr. He's had a PB 1.5 or 2 seconds ahead of Josh Kerr, but Kerr's best chance of beating him was through that final 200 meters. Meaning that for his best chance of victory, Jakob needed to take the pace out hard and really tire out Kerr so he didn't have that energy for the final 200 meters. But this is where I think his over-reliance on pace is starting to come into effect, because we saw him take up the pace very, very fast. In the second lap as well, he started to almost accelerate away from the pack a little bit, and I think it was in maybe a 2 or 3 meter gap there. Started off very quick, almost at world record pace. We saw Jakob fade quite heavily around the end of the third lap, because that 2 or 3 meter gap had closed quite quickly. And then of course in the final lap, where Ingebrigtsen isn't known to be the best, we saw that he faded massively and actually finished in 4th place, which I don't think anyone was expecting. Of course, you did have some other good contenders there. You had Timothy Cheruiyot, you had Cole Hocker in there, which people was definitely on the Americans' radar from what I noticed. You also had Jared Naguse there, but I don't think the majority of people were really expecting these guys to win the race. It was mainly just a duel between Jakob and Kerr, and the rest of those guys would kind of have to fight out for the bronze medal. But now let's break down exactly what happened during the race and how Cole Hocker was able to outkick Josh Kerr and still maintain that 3:27 pace. And I think this race actually played out very similarly to the 10,000 meters we had a few days ago. The race started off very quickly with many of the main contenders going at a very fast pace at the start. If we look here around the 550 meter mark, we can see that the main contenders are really up there. You've seen Jakob, of course, over here is leading the pack. You've got Brian Common sort of sitting on his shoulder, and then Josh Kerr is right next to Jakob. And his plan, of course, is to try and sit on Jakob's shoulder and then outkick him in the last stretch. We see Naguse is also up there. Cheruiyot is just battling out on the outside there with Josh Kerr, and Cole Hocker is just staying out of trouble. He's in a good prime position to be able to strike if anything adverse happens in the race. He's not having to worry about tripping or negotiate with the lane dynamic that the front 6 here are having to deal with. Because what it came down to is that Josh Kerr and Jakob used all of their energy dueling with each other. I mean, we see here, of course it's a minor thing, but at the championship level this stuff matters. The Josh Kerr and Ingebrigtsen having to really negotiate lane dynamics and run very carefully. Having someone right on your shoulder is always going to put a bit of pressure on you. And watching where you take a stride is always going to expend that little bit of extra energy. But Hocker doesn't need to worry about that. He's got 6 people pacing him, and he's not really super close to anyone. And then when we look at the final lap in the back straight, we see that Kerr had to waste quite a lot of energy overtaking Cheruiyot when Jakob started to accelerate. And again, being forced to overtake Cheruiyot would have taken some of the energy out of Josh Kerr's kick. If we look around the second lap, for instance, where Jakob started to really accelerate away from the pack, we saw that both Cheruiyot and Kerr started to accelerate to try and keep up with him, and had a little surge in pace there. Whereas Cole Hocker was sort of just chilling at the back and relying on the fact that these guys were going to slow down and wouldn't be able to maintain that fast pace. Which was a bet by him, but it paid off nicely because it means that he didn't expend energy surging. Whereas Kerr, Cheruiyot and Ingebrigtsen lost a bit of energy because they were all dueling with each other. Or trueling, I suppose is the word. Then again on the final lap, Kerr had to overtake Cheruiyot before he really started to fade. I kind of predicted that Cheruiyot would start to fade in this race. He has a habit of going off with the front runner who normally is Ingebrigtsen at this point, despite not really having the fitness for it. And I really respect it, of course. You know, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to really go for it. But it seems he just doesn't have the fitness that he used to. He did very well in the Oslo Diamond League, of course, but we've seen a couple races where he tends to try and go with Ingebrigtsen and then just fade towards the end, especially in the World Championships recently. But Kerr still had to really fight him to be able to overtake him because Cheruiyot hadn't faded massively. But it was easier and would have taken less energy for Hocker to overtake Cheruiyot because Cheruiyot was really starting to slow down by that point. Again, allowing Hocker to conserve a little bit more energy than Josh Kerr. And then if we look at the all-important moment in the final 200, you can see that Kerr and Ingebrigtsen are really involved in this duel. If you look out here, Ingebrigtsen has sort of drifted out to the side because he feels Kerr is on his shoulder and he's trying to make it harder for him. Naguse is always in the back there, but no one's really clocking that Cole Hocker is in prime position, and of course he's known for his sprint. But he's out of trouble here. He's running an efficient line on the inside, whereas Kerr is having to run an extra 5 meters in lane 2. And again, I think this is where that sort of ego battle comes from, and the media hyping everything up, including myself. Because if Ingebrigtsen was forced to lose to either Hocker or Josh Kerr, he would probably take losing to Hocker over Josh Kerr. We see by his foot placement that Ingebrigtsen starts to realise that Hocker is a real threat and starts to close that line a little bit in the final 100. But by that point, the damage has been done to Josh Kerr because he's run an extra 5 meters on the outside, and Hocker's been able to conserve his energy. Again, in the final 100, we see that Jakob starts to drift out slightly in an effort to block Kerr. Of course, that means the space on the inside does open up for Cole Hocker, but I assume Ingebrigtsen A, didn't want to lose to Josh Kerr, and B, made a bet in the heat of the moment that Josh Kerr was a bigger threat than Cole Hocker. Of course, he was wrong in the end though, as Hocker was able to sneak up on the inside and outkick Josh Kerr. And Ingebrigtsen faded badly, man, and Naguse as well had a strong finish. He had to swell on the outside because Hocker, Kerr and Ingebrigtsen were all having their battle, but he was still able to finish in 3rd place and was very close to hitting second place. I think a big factor here that allowed Kerr to take the silver medal is that he ran the race very efficiently in terms of timing his stride with the finish line. We see here that Ngus was finishing like a freight train here, and he ran an extra half stride to finish the race because your torso is the main thing that matters when it comes to crossing the finish line. But Kerr here, by his foot placement, you can see he timed his stride exactly to the finish line, allowing him to be slightly more efficient in that final 100. And I'm not necessarily going to say that's intentional. I don't think that's something that athletes can really time in the heat of the moment. But it's kind of mental to think that that was the difference between a bronze and a silver medal, because you can see by their head placement here that Ngus is very slightly ahead. I also want to give a shout out to Ngus because this is his first major competition beyond, I suppose, the World Championships. It's his first Olympics. Everyone was sort of counting out in the heats. I didn't commentate much about the heats because I decided that there wasn't too much to say. But at the end of the day, the heats don't matter. They rarely tell you anything. You don't get any medals for winning the heats. So I remember when I saw Ngus in the heats really struggling, I was thinking that that might be a sign that his fitness isn't all there. But of course, he counteracted that point in the semi-final, being able to front run that race pretty easily. And he went from just scraping through the heat to being able to get a bronze medal and very close to silver as well. You've got to wonder about how all the athletes are going to be reacting to this. I'm very much looking to the post-match interviews because it was very, very interesting, the result. Ingebrigtsen did give a quick 1 or 2 minute interview post-race, and he seemed actually very gracious in defeat. Of course, he normally is very respectful to his opponents and gives them their due, but he comes across, if you look at the past 2 World Championships, as much more pissed off and, I don't want to say make excuses, but giving reasons as to why he didn't win, in a way that kind of implies like, oh, I wasn't at my full fitness. So for instance, he seemed very angry. He said that his race tactics weren't there for the Oregon 2022 World Championships when Jake Whiteman outkicked him. And he said he was starting to get a little bit of illness with Josh Kerr. But here he seemed less pissed off and was actually smiling during the interview. He basically said that he felt very strong, but he hit the wall before he realized that he hit the wall, which of course does happen in 1500 meter running. And that does seem to kind of add up with what you see happened in the race, because he started to open a real gap there around the 800 meter mark, because he started to open a real gap there around the second lap there. I do wonder what this says about his mentality. This is a bit of armchair psychology here, but I find it interesting that he was less angry at the situation considering he also came fourth. If you think about how angry he was when he came second, I was thinking that he'd be raging about the fact that he's come fourth. Maybe he knows that he's still got a solid shot with the 5,000 meters to get the gold medal there, and also Cheptegei pulling out will definitely help his chances. If you look at Kerr as well, it was a similar story in the fact that he seemed fairly happy given that he got the silver medal, especially because in pre-race interviews he said that he wouldn't have taken a silver if you gave it to him beforehand. I'm guessing he's just happy that he beat Jakob, and of course he has had his moment with the World Championships, but I'm surprised that he was not super angry about Hocker winning by the looks of things. He seemed to more of a face that was sort of just, shit happens, man. I suppose he did run the race as well as he could. He did seem to get a little bit caught up in that duel there, but very few people really expected Hocker to take that, so I suppose he thinks that he ran the race he could given the situation. Moving on to what this means to the 5,000 meters and for Jakob, because of course I did pick Jakob to win the 5,000 meters fairly confidently as well. And does this affect my pick? Well, one of the problems I think Jakob is going to face is that he's ran a very tough race in the 1500 meters. Of course, he faded massively, which means he was probably flooding with lactate towards the last 100. And although the 5000 meters is on Saturday, the heats are tomorrow. So he's going to have very little time to recover from that. And just like when Cheptegei won the 10,000, the doubts are starting to come to my mind about, is Jakob going to have the fitness for it? Is he really going to be able to win the 5,000 meter? I'd say it's definitely put a slight dent in my confidence, this fact. Jakob does need to hope that the heat is nice and easy tomorrow, and hopefully it will be. Of course, it is just a heat there. And it will be filtered with athletes who aren't really medal contenders or finalist contenders. So it's more about things not going wrong compared to a final where you need things to go right in order to do well. And in the 5,000 meter, it is a different field. He will have a strong sprint finish compared to the rest of the guys because he's also a 1500 meter runner, of course. And if we look at the reasons that he gave as to why he lost the 1500 meter, he said that he wasn't able to realize how tired he was until it was too late, essentially. And the 5,000 meters, the pace will of course be much slower, and therefore we'll kind of have a bit more time to think about it. The pressure of Josh Kerr being right on his shoulder as well, and the sort of media battle, the rivalry that they've had between each other would of course put pressure on him. I would say that this has definitely put a dent in my confidence as to whether he'll win the 5,000, but there are too many unknowns for me to want to switch my pick, and I think I also want to be consistent as well. So I'm still going to stick with Jakob winning the 5,000 meters. Of course, Hocker as well must be over the moon, and that's a massive 3-second personal best for him. I feel like I haven't mentioned him too much in this analysis. That is of course because it was a huge upset, and Kerr and Jakob were the ones who were really kind of making the race eventful and having a duel with each other. Hocker was just being very tactical and sitting in the back there, not really doing much, staying out of trouble. But he's now cemented himself as a serious contender on the world stage. I counted him out a little bit before. I was thinking he was potentially a bronze medal contender, because although he is known to have a very fast sprint finish, I was thinking that the sprint would be the most important thing for this race. It was a mid 3:30, and I was expecting the pace to be a low 3:28. And Hocker has never really proved that he's able to have that kick and those much faster paces, but of course it seems that he does. So congratulations to him. That's really going to shake up the distance running world. I'm sure many people, including myself, are going to be watching his career with great interest now. If you want to see my pick and more detailed breakdown for the 5,000 meter, including who I think silver and bronze will be, then click on this video here. Thank you very much for watching the video. Leave your comments in the comments box below, guys. What a crazy race that was. I really want to hear everyone's thoughts. And props to everyone as well, because I got more than a few comments saying that Hocker would win. So well done to all those people who were able to pick that out early. I really wasn't expecting him to get the gold there, so hats off. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.